successes in life and in politics. What about your biggest defeat?
Defeat. Oh, but I hate starting things that I don't finish. And the reason why is that when I was going to university, when I was young, after I played in the band, came back to London, Ontario, went to Western. I was married and inherited two children, had one of my own. And it was difficult being a student, raising the family, trying to play drums, raise a family. And I think at that time, I was spending maybe $11 a week on groceries. I mean, it was tough. It was tough then. And we were not very, very well off as a family when we came from Italy to Timmins. I mean, my father had a great job in Italy, but he gave all that up because of me and my sisters, and for a better future. So he gave up a great future because he was a policeman to come and work in the railroads and in the ditches and in the pipes and in the roadways. Very hard job, not fit for himself, but for me. And so when I look back at failures, and so if I have a failing, or where I failed, is that I didn't complete my education, and that's because I couldn't. I needed to get out to work to help my family, and then I started my own businesses. I got involved in politics. I never had enough time. So, in fact, 4 years ago, I thought when I was out of politics, if I wanted to do something and finish something that I started, I would have come back and finished the 2 or 3 credits that I need at the university in order to finish. Or the other one was that perhaps maybe I was meant to be a great musician, and I didn't stay in music, and which is a lot more pleasurable sometimes in politics, right?
Yeah.
In politics, sometimes you have to be a masochist, or you have to love pain. Music, I love. It doesn't cause any pain whatsoever. It's soothing. It's very nice.
Who is your hero, or why? Do you have a hero?
Yeah, well, politically it was always Pierre Trudeau, because I think he opened up Canada to Cuba, to China, to Latin America. And Pierre Trudeau, which was Prime Minister, started in 1968. Kennedy, talk about dreams and aspirations. There's a guy that wasn't a president for very long, but did he take a country and raise it up and say, look at that. I've met Mandela. I've met John Paul II 3 times, people who have been inspirational. I've met presidents, prime ministers, kings, queens, you name it. But let me tell you the story about 2 people who had more of an impression on me than any king or queen or politician. I went to Sudan about 7 or 8 years ago. One of my friends, Glenn Pearson, brought me there because what was happening there is that the women were being abducted, the men were being butchered, and the kids were being taken. And he said, Joe, you have to come and see what's happening because we have to get these women and children back. So I went there. I was the first Canadian parliamentarian who had gone to southern Sudan, which was in the middle of a civil war. 2 million people had already been killed. 4 million people had been displaced, all because of oil, and because they were black, and because they were poor, and nobody really cared. Jimmy Carter's convoy had been bombed a month before I went there. I was threatened not to go there, but I went there. And so when I was there and I saw this horror, I saw and shook hands with the devil. Because to see what people do to people, limbs gone, butchered, women that were raped and terrified, and young people. And yet I also saw God there, and I'll tell you where. God was in the eyes of these young kids who didn't have very much food to eat. They had maybe a cup like this a week, had witnessed what they've seen about their fathers, had been victimized, had eyes like this and hope. And I brought astronaut food, I brought crayons, I brought balloons, and you know what they took, even though as hungry as that they were, they took the crayons and the coloring books. And they wanted to see the world, because the balloon showed the globe. Now, if that doesn't change your life and saying, look at it, in the midst of all of this horror, you look at a young 3 or 4 year old and you see hope, that sort of is a life-changing experience. The second person that changed my life in sort of way is that when I was Minister of Homelessness, And it was my job to look at and see how we can deal with homeless people. I met this person who 7 years earlier was the top doctor in the country, living in Toronto. Top doctor. And unfortunately, a tragedy beset his life, and he lost everything. He lost his family, he lost his fortune, he lost his dignity, he lost everything. He was living under the bridges and on the streets. And when I saw him, he was working in a shelter in a place where the federal government was funding. And I was told about this story, and I went there and to talk to him and said, "How are you doing?" and so on and so forth. And I said to him, "So, why is it that?" And thank God you're starting to build your life up again. Why? And he said, "Because someone did not give up on me." Right? So what does that tell you about the story about the little child in Sudan, or the doctor that was homeless in Toronto, or everybody in our families? Is that we'll all go through some incredible challenges in our life, and you have to have people who believe in you, that won't give up on you, and that will support you. And that's what family, that's what politics should be all about. That's what the charity that I have, which feeds 140,000 kids a week across the country. All volunteers. 400 programs, 100 communities. We feed 140,000 kids a week all across the country, and all with volunteers. I got to raise a lot of money as the chairman of the board of Trinity Foundation, and Show Kids You Care is the name of the program, where we have people who prepare the food each and every morning, the lunch, the snack programs, because even in London, 1 in 6 children go to bed at night hungry. How do you learn? How can you be healthy? How are you going to have a good future if you go to bed or you go to school hungry? And in a country which is the 7th richest country in the world, right? I mean, there's no excuse. There's no excuse that 1 in 6 in London are in that situation. Why? So we got to do things differently. So it's not all about business. It's not all about balancing the budget. It's about making sure that this community is as strong as it can be. And unfortunately, some of our new Canadians, new immigrants that are refugees, that came here under very difficult circumstances, even as immigrants, and sometimes are finding it difficult.
How do you want to be remembered?
That I did a good job. When I left Ottawa, after 18 years in being a minister, I like when I go, and I went to Costa Rica as an example, and I was the Minister of Labor. That people in Costa Rica knew that the government of Canada helped build 10,000 homes for the earthquake, and helped build the labor code of how the coffee pickers or the people there have labor laws, because I brought them there, or Canada brought them there, but I was the minister who initiated that. Or if I helped an immigrant solve their problems, or a refugee stay here, that is the most gratifying thing. That I helped a small business succeed, I did that. That I brought some money to the University of Western Ontario, Fanshawe, so that they could educate a lot more kids. As long as they say that Joe Fontana, in his 30 or 35 years in politics, did a good job and he was a nice guy, I'm satisfied, right?
Okay. You have told us a lot of things, but what is any little known fact about Joe Fontana that most residents probably don't know?
Non-facts. My story has always been an open book, but
Something. Well, let me help you with this. What about what is your guilty pleasure? Do you have any guilty pleasure?
I'm Italian. I got a lot of.
A lot.
A little sweet.
Yeah. So no, I better not go there.
All right.
Yeah.
Probably the last.
As I said, I'm Italian, so I have
Plenty of those.
Yeah.
Boxers or briefs?
briefs.